Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to find out what you're about to know. This is your Screen Queen, your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. For 50 episodes, I have been your lean, mean movie talking machine, providing your subscription to free fiction, your Screen Queen, Samantha Parrish. Wow. 50 episodes. 50 episodes! I've made 50 episodes. People have listened to 50 episodes. 50, damn, it's like a, excuse me. As you can see, I'm getting choked up over here. Like, 50 is it feels like such a small number, but there's such a weight to that number now that I'm halfway to 100 episodes. It's such a accomplishment. It's a mile marker for how far I've stayed with this show, like adamantly made episodes and promised a new episode every week, and then got into a schedule and created a spin-off and created a tiny little special featurette spin-off. It's starting to sink in now with how much I've made with the show and stayed with it. I've been doing this for such a long time, my dudes and dudettes and my non-binary babies. I hit the YouTube game since I was 13 and following the coattails of my favorite YouTubers and trying to do what they do. But above everything else, this show has helped me find my voice. And then finally, being a podcaster, I found my voice, but that itself, that took 2 shows to finally find this is what works for me. And it's nice to know how much I have progressed. I hear it from my friends. The other day I was talking to my friend Ams about the 50th episode, and they just went on to say, it's amazing how far you've come with this show. I've seen the change in you so much from when you first started out, and then growing the show and everything you've provided for it. And it was just floored me to hear that. Like, I'm still not used to positive comments, because your girl grew up with the dark humor mentality, so it's just like enough is never enough, and I'm not doing good, and my friends, God bless them, have been working with me and still tell me and give me my flowers and give me my credit for how far I've done stuff, and to make me look at my accomplishments, which I used to think was so minute, like it wasn't enough. But then, really looking at it, I've created a book series called Inglorious Inc. that was written and then rewritten, and had to put that out in the span of a year, and then making a podcast show every Sunday and sticking with it, and creating all of these unique commentaries. But I've noticed the way that I've made this show is that it's helped me commentate in a way that's creative and conclusive, but doesn't feel convoluted, because, ADHD loves to provide some word vomit, and it's like, I could always see it in my head of like, oh, I want to talk about this, and it'd be so great, but then it comes out like just gibberish, and it doesn't sound constructive, and it doesn't really sound flowing, and, as an author, I now look at a lot of my commentary now that it has to make sense, it has to make a point. But it's been nice with this show that I do push myself a little further in my commentary, but I also make sure that it's still casual. Like, if I'm not having fun, then I shouldn't be here. The whole point of the show is to have fun, and the moment it stops being fun, that's not good. I love talking about movies and TV shows. That if it becomes too trite, it's like, that's not good. And knowing the fact that I'm still having fun, and I'm still progressing in my commentary, and that people still come back every Sunday, it's like, okay, wow, I'm doing something right. And I love with this show and how the commentary goes, that I can just let the lid off the top of the cup and just pour out whatever I want to, and explore all these different ideals and topics. But I also love the fact that I get to finally be personal in a show and not have that take away from my commentary. I've enjoyed being able to give personal details of my life and giving these stories about my grandfather, my friends, my mom, and the weight of that story that pairs with the movie I'm talking about, with how much that memory means to me, and I get to share that on this show. But this is going to be a first, where this is going to be an episode that's going to be all personal. Talking about the birth of the Screen Queen, how the show came to be, and I remembered like the day of when it just occurred to me, I want to make a show about shows. Let's do it. And I get to finally share that moment, and I've been waiting. I thought about doing it for the 100th episode, but I just can't wait. So here we go. This is the birth of the Screen Queen. If the show was a pregnancy, then I would say that the release date and birthing date would be May 6th, 2022. But I didn't officially have this show in its weird technical trimester until February of 2022. So picture it, me, on the couch, in the living room, laptop in my lap, TV on, and I'm watching The Unforgivable with Sandra Bullock on Netflix. And it just occurs to me, I should make a podcast show. The entire time I've been sitting there, I've been making like little in-jokes in my head and making little trivia connections and little nods and some really concrete commentary. And I'm like, gosh, like I have so much about this movie. And I have so many things about other films. I think I should make a second podcast show. And so I got one of my new notebooks, and you can't see it, but I'm actually currently reading off of the very first notebook where I wrote a majority of all the episodes, including the production process for how I wanted to make this movie podcast show. And I was just writing down ideas and everything, and I was just like going with it, like, okay, wow, this is going to be a thing. I don't know when, but I want us to go ahead and just start putting down some ideas on paper, and I'll know when I have found the perfect title and how I want to start the show. I just didn't put so much emphasis in that moment and just wanted to let that moment just settle in and then finally start making those foundations brick by brick. Because, Rome wasn't built in a day. And I started making certain ideas. And I'm about to tell you what the original names were before we got the Screen Queen. Let me get my little list down. This feels so historical, my God. Okay, here we go. The very first page on this notebook, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 titles before I settled on the Screen Queen. And I'm going to go from beginning to end, and I think you'll know which one became the winner, how that process started, and how we got here. So here we go. So I'm just going to go right down the line, and I'll put some breaks in between so you know what the title is. Now You Know This. The Scene Cinema. Another Movie Podcast. That Movie Podcast. What's That Movie? Cinema Show. That Female. I didn't have something else to go with that. It just became a half title. Cinemalytics. Your Movie Podcast. The Movies That Move Me. Beyond the Screen. That Scene Girl. And The Screen Queen. Once that title came up, I'm like, that's it! We got it! It's like that scene from Seinfeld where Jason Alexander is like, we got it! We're going home! Like, that's it! Oh, like, it just all came together. But the funny thing, though, was that I was already making the episodes before I even had a title. It's like, oh no, what's gonna happen? This is terrible. This is like having a movie, and it's so great, and people ask what the title is. Like, oh, I don't know. We're just gonna go along with it. Like, it's kind of scary. It's like having a cup of water at the edge of the table, and you're waiting for it to fall, but it won't fall. But it's like, oh, this is impressive and terrifying. Oh, this is terrible. And I started putting episodes together and getting things in the process before I even had my title. I knew there was stuff that I could do in that in-between process before I could finally get into my podcast studio. But here's the timeline of how this whole process for the show went. The idea happened in February 2022. The show came out, its 3-episode debut in June 2022. But that middle part is, that core part has a lot of history that, makes the show very special, but also it still lives with me for what happened to me during that time period. In March 2022, I left my boyfriend of a year and 4 months. And I've talked a little bit about my relationship with him on this show. And it was an emotionally abusive relationship that I went through. And one thing about that relationship was I was forbidden to talk about movies. And, look at me now. Now I have a whole show about movies and TV shows, and that never felt like a fuck you to him, but it was something that was so tough in that relationship that I couldn't talk about the things I love, and anytime I wanted to say, hey, I'm into this show right now, or I want to talk about this, he would just go, ugh, you're back on your movie shit. I hate it when you talk about movies. And it's sad because that's a big part of me. When you love someone, you love every part of them. Even if it's stuff that you're not into, but you would never hate what that person loves because of how much that defines their character. That should have been my first clicker about the narcissism that existed in that relationship. But when I was with him, I knew in my gut that if I told him about this show, he would find a way to take it away from me. So whenever I would go see him on the weekends, I would have my little podcast notebook with me, and I'd be writing down ideas, and he would be off fucking around doing whatever he wanted to do and ignoring me. And I just was like, okay, I'm just going to keep writing this thing. And I knew it was a good move for me to keep that to myself. He kept trying to find ways to take things away from me, and he really failed. I was a lot stronger than I gave myself credit for, but that was just one thing that I'm glad was never brought into the relationship of that thing I was working on. Because narcissists, they love to, build themselves up by breaking people down. And then, after I broke up with him in March 8th, 2022, I gave myself 2 weeks. I'm like, alright, I need to take this healing process bit by bit. I can't just go jumping back into work. That's not going to erase what happened to me. I need to just take it one therapy session at a time and get my spark back. And I'm really glad that I took that time to just work on myself. And some days are good and some days are bad. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened to me when I was with him. And that'll just take time, and it'll just be bothering me until one day it doesn't bother me anymore. It's just the way it comes down to. It's what I've known. And I just kind of hold on to the sides of the boat and just sort of ride out the waves, and the waves get a little bit easier every day. But during those first weeks where I became a newly single woman and getting to enjoy all the things that I couldn't enjoy when I was with him, I got to have a new lease on life. My brain felt a lot better because it wasn't crushed by the abuse. And I got to explore those topics a little bit more and get to revisit those things that I've been working on. I was like, wow, my head feels a lot lighter than it did when I was with him. So after 2 weeks of giving myself some self-care days and getting myself, back into creativity, I started working on the Screen Queen show and putting down some ideas. And finally, in April. Yeah, April. Yeah, my birthday month. Yeah, wait, what day was it? Oh, yes, it was April. It was April. Sorry about that. Memory lane gets a little bit tricky sometimes. So in April 2022, I was doing one of my little creative sessions at Panera, because, you know, your girl likes to go to the cafes and get ideas and whatnot. You know, take myself out for a date. And I've been working on the show, and I put down some titles and was just thinking of anything on top of my head, like Zodiac, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The People vs. Larry Flint, The Little Mermaid. And then I thought, where the hell am I going to start? How is this show going to work? And I'm glad I thought of that process first before, like, the picture process was pursued more or anything. Like, I had to know, how is this show going to go? I even asked my sister, I asked my friends, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take a screenshot of these ideas I have. Which one would you like to be the first episode for the Screen Queen? And so I had gotten some votes, like Zodiac, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then I'm like, you know what? I think I like the idea of not knowing. And that's how the Lotto system was born. And knowing that process, I could just start with my introduction and then just lead in with, oh, we're going to have a Lotto system. And there'll be more about that Lotto system much later on in the episode. Because I want to continue talking about the story of this very special day for the Screen Queen's, you know, trimester process. It's like second trimester, essentially, for this, you know, this metaphorical birth for a podcast. Now, it was at that moment that everything was starting to form together. The show finally had a formula of how the routine would go, and I sat with the name Screen Queen for a while, and I wanted to make sure that I was sold on it, and I felt pretty good. And so it was time to proceed with the next part of the production for the show, which was my iconic profile picture. Now, the person who does my pictures is an artist named Emily Whitaker. And their pronouns are she, they, so I'm going to bounce around with these two different pronouns just to kind of clear that. And she did my picture for my other show, my first show, Paris Passages Podcast. So when it came time for the Screen Queen, it was a no-brainer who I wanted to go to. And I went to my car in the Panera parking lot, and I contacted Emily, and I had told her the news and kept her updated that I wanted to go to her, but I just didn't know when. And they were like, hey, don't worry about it. You just focus on you, and I'll be here. And after telling them what was going to happen with the show, I gave them my idea, and I told them that I wanted this picture to be a picture of me. And before I was against the idea, because I did that for Paris Passages Podcast. It was just a TV screen with some books to show who I was, but it doesn't show who I am, so I could actually show who I am. Like, what do I look like? And self-esteem was finally kicking back in, so I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna put me on the cover. Why not? And I liked the idea of showing what I look like, what I love to look like, with my big wavy curly hair and my signature style with my chic clothes. And the one staple of Sammy is that I always wear big circle glasses. Anyone that knows me in real life knows that is signature Sammy. And I envisioned those glasses to have like some static through it, and I love the idea. It really encapsulates something like ethereal, otherworldly, a little bit strange, a little bit weird, a little bit odd. And that's kind of generally the same kind of themes I do in my books, so I wanted my picture to represent all the things that I love in that kind of aesthetic, a weird aesthetic. And I told them my idea, and they were like, oh my god, I love it, send me the picture, and told them what I wanted to happen with the glasses. And we did 2 different styles for artistry until I was sold on which one I wanted to prefer. Emily's amazing when it comes to working with clients and seeing what they want and the exact vision, and just knew what I wanted. And when they had asked me all these questions, Emily had asked me, okay, so what's the title of the show? Have you finally decided on what you landed on? And I told them I am going to name it The Screen Queen. And they're like, that is so you. I'm like, yeah. And that's how the picture was born, right there in the Panera parking lot. And for one last little bit about that picture before we move on to the other aspects of the creation of the show, Emily sent me the original traced copy that she had for a reference photo when she was making my picture. And it's super cool. I have a picture of it on my Instagram of when she sent it to me in the mail. It's so cool to look at. I'm just like, oh, this is like the only like uncreepy way to like be like so immersed with myself, because it's so cool to see that's a pivotal part in the creation for the Screen Queen. It's super cool to have this little historical relic that I get to attach with this show. So Emily, if you're listening to this episode, thank you so much for being a part of the show, babe. Thank you so much for helping me. If you would like to see more of the art from my amazing friend Emily Whitaker, her information is always listed in the description box. Every single episode for 50 episodes, her information is always going to be there. So I had my picture, I had my title, and I had my flow of how I wanted the show to go. And then came the day to record the episodes, and it was all done in the month of April. And then a month later, it comes out in May. So it's a long process between March being that little creative month, and then April being the production month, and then May being the release month. So April was a busy time. And I thought, why not make this similarly in the same fashion of when other content creators put out stuff, that they have an ample amount of stuff to work with, so that way there's a lot of variety behind it. It felt really professional to start this show out on a high note, to have everything layered in those bricks that were beginning to pile and get there and starts to form the house. When I started recording the first episode for the Screen Queen to make my whole introduction, that felt like an out-of-body experience. Like, I definitely felt like I was looking at myself from like a different perspective, to know, wow, I feel like I'm making history. I feel like I'm making history for podcasts, but I also feel like I'm making my own history for how far I've come, that I went from being a published author, and now I am getting to make a podcast about the second love of my life with movies and TV shows after, let's see here, 14 years of making YouTube videos that didn't pan out and never giving up, to know there's a platform out there, and that I felt so comfortable that I found work like just talking out loud into a microphone was much better than going to a camera and criticizing myself. I can see now why Sia doesn't look at the crowd when she sings. There is a comfort in just talking to a microphone, and that it's vastly different than the equipment that I'm used to for 13, 15 years of having to have a nice camera, make sure it's focused, make sure the battery is good, making sure the lighting is good, having all of my points corrected, and all I have to do is just talk into a microphone and read off of my points. Like, there's a limited checklist than having all these things to be demanding, that I can still be myself, but I've noticed I'm way more expressive when I'm not being seen on a camera, that I can just let things go because I'm not worried about a camera. And the microphone is going, so I'm like bringing the most authentic Sammy in this podcast booth. Another example, I can see now why like Will Friedle loves voice acting than regular acting, because he said that he has so much anxiety. And you do hear a lot more of Will Friedle when he's Ron Stoppable or Batman when he's in the booth, and he's way more expressive. And it is nice to like know all you have to do is provide a voice. And it's wonderful. I've been told a lot of times with this podcast show that I can be a really good voice actor, and I'm like, shit, I can see it now that I know how the magic works and everything. Now I know the element is like to not be seen, and there's so much comfort to just bring the full expressionism. But that brings up another good point about the creation of this show, was the writing process and the recording process, for how everything you listen to is half and half. Half of it is casual, and half of it is structured. And it took a while to get here. When I first began my podcast show, my first podcast show, Paris Passages Podcast, I learned a lot from that show that has cultivated its way for the Screen Queen, but when I first started writing for the Paris Passages Podcast show, I was very scared. I really wanted to be taken seriously, and I wanted all of my commentary out there, so I had to read things word for word. And that made things very stiff. It made it very rigid. And it hurt the show immensely that I wasn't giving 100% of Sammy into Paris Passage's podcast. And I was also still with my ex-boyfriend at the time. So that hurt the show immensely because I sounded so miserable with how much that relationship was really impacting my creative outlets, that I couldn't really give 100% into those shows. And then, as I mentioned earlier, after I broke up with him and I got back into my creativity, and it felt a lot better. But with the way that I created the show, I wanted to do something differently than I did with Paris Passages, and to just let it go. Just like Elsa sings. I remembered how rigid I felt. I had the most thought-provoking creative terms, but it sounded like it was in the same emphasis of Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, actually, no. He had more emotion in that than what I had because of how much there was, what was going through my mind and what was happening to me personally, and it impacted my show. But then also looking at that without the misery of what I went through, the show was not structured very well. It was too structured. And I took a cue from that to just see what I could do. And I didn't give myself a lot of credit that I'm smarter than I am, and smarter than the people that make me out to not be smart. And so I just started making bullet points and just going off the fly. I even mentioned in my first episode that entire episode was done without a script, just to test myself, to see how much I could do. And that episode feels so important to know, wow, I did it. I really can do it. It's kind of like, getting the training wheels off of the bicycle, or getting your wings ready and taking off and knowing, wow, I'm still in the air. I'm still on the bike path. I'm still doing good. And knowing, okay, this show's going to be great. I got everything I need. And doing the bullet points instead of these word for word things has been such a wonderful thing to see, the slow diminishing of those points, that I can be able to retain the stuff I want to do and just have fun being on the fly and just let something just be presented and working with something and being a little bit more spontaneous. And I love how that show has really helped me out. Again, just like I mentioned earlier, this show really helped my voice, and seeing how the writing process has been better, but that the confidence of my commentary has immensely improved. So looking at the show with what is generally the sugar, spice, and everything nice is the picture, the writing, and the confidence. But the chemical X is the Lotto system of what truly makes the show. The Lotto system, as I mentioned earlier, was a completely spontaneous idea to make the show more spontaneous. The Lotto system has given me such a relief for how the episode release goes, that it's not specifically catering to something that I'm currently into, or trying to go through my list and go, oh, I'm just going to do this episode, and then feel overwhelmed by the other ones that I want to do. And it just helps that selection where I don't have the control of what the next episode is going to be. It's like the ignorance is bliss, that living in mystery is going to help me out, that I can be pleasantly surprised for what it's going to be, that it might be a favorite TV show, or it might be one I haven't watched for a while, or it might be like a very serious episode. Then it presents this challenge that I can be able to bring. But the Lotto system has also helped the show from feeling that it's being self-centered to cater to what I like. I thought a lot about the show for the fact that I'm a provider of commentary, and that people are going to want to watch things. I had to think about things from my own perspective about being a fan and what I look forward to, and embracing different stuff. That I get to hear commentators and critiquers like Doug Walker to talk about like his favorite things, but then also being fair to talk about stuff that has been highly requested, or things that he just generally doesn't like, but he does still want to provide that for the people that have requested it, that there's so much faith in him for what people want to see from him, and he delivers it. And I want to do the same thing too, to watch certain movies or TV shows that I generally don't like, but I know someone else likes it out there, and they would love to see that on the show, or hear it on the show. You get what I mean? And it's lovely just living in mystery, and it makes the show have a better batch of episodes that is very sporadic and random, where you never know what you're going to get. We never know what direction we're going to go. Sometimes it's been quite funny that the luck of the draw has given me an episode that follows the same style of genre as the last episode, like Copland and Beverly Hills Cop, like, kind of went hand in hand, and I'm just like, wow, that's kind of a funny, like hand in hand one. But then the third episode's going to be completely random. Just watch it, and I'm like sitting back wondering, so how is the pattern going to break? I'm kind of intrigued to see it myself, to see what's going to happen. But I also have to admit something with the Lotto system is sometimes I do put the pick back in the box. So the general rule for the Lotto system is that anything that is picked out will be the next episode. But if I pick something out of the box, and if it's a series or a movie that I have not seen for quite some time, or if it's a movie that I haven't seen yet, or if it's a movie or TV series that has heavy subject material, I do put it back in the box. I erase the clip, and then I start the whole process over again until I get one that I know I can bring a full service to. I had thought about this and feeling like it felt very self-centered and unfair, that I felt like I was sort of rigging my own Lotto system that's supposed to be spontaneous. But if I pushed forward and did something that covered a TV show or a movie that I didn't have enough material for, then I would be doing a disservice for that episode. And I want to give a great episode that covers all the grounds and covers all the topics of what I can bring, so I can fully satisfy the listener to give them what they want to hear. I would hate it if I was looking forward to an episode for something and all of the various elements were not elaborated or expanded, and I didn't really get to learn more about my favorite TV show or movie. And with a show like this, I scour everywhere. I go with IMDb, I go Wikipedia, I scour everything to make it a very entertaining and neutral episode. And I want to give 100% into something, and I learned it in my mistakes from the past when I was writing my book series Inglorious Inc., and I kept putting plot points in there and putting more stuff, and then one of my friends pointed out to me and just said, Sammy, when are you ever going to be done? Like, you're not closing it up. And that would have been the same issue here if I pursued an episode that I would just be nitpicking at, and I'd rather not do the episode and wait until I know, yep, I got everything covered for it to be published. No problem at all. And the same thing goes for episodes that has controversial material or something that I know is easily going to trigger an audience member. Those ones has its own specific time and place when I feel like I'm ready to dive into it. I had that happen with The Nightingale a couple of times whenever that ended up being picked, and I had to keep putting it back until I knew, okay, I'm ready to dive into this episode and get it over with. And I'm glad that I gave myself the time for some of those episodes that dealt into heavy subject material to be mentally prepared to talk about it, but then to have something prepared for my audience to get into the episode. It's like, I gotta have all the battle stations ready for that one. So think about that when you get to hear, what's the next episode going to be on the Screen Queen? That there's a very very strategic process when it comes to making sure that the best episode will be presented. And the Lotto system has grown. It was originally in this little Alice in Wonderland bowl, like a tiny soup bowl, essentially. And there was like pieces of paper sticking out. Papers be flying every single time I'd be doing my little shuffling of the spontaneous episodes. And finally I had to upgrade to a bigger box. At some point I'm going to get one of those like little things you see on like the lottery shows where the woman spins the thing, and just that giant system. That's what I need for the episodes. I would love that. It might have to happen one day. honestly, thinking on this right now, I'd love to get one of those little gumball machines and put all the pieces in there and, turn it around and boom, like that's the episode. That seems like a cool idea. I like that. It'll be interesting to see what the future looks like for how these core parts of the show does dive further. Like, I have all of my bricks down and the foundation is set up, the house is complete, and I've been slowly putting the furniture into this metaphorical presentation of the podcast show. But, houses get renovated. Houses get expanded. Houses have extra work and things get replaced. Or they get extra stuff. And there are a lot of plans I have for how the Screen Queen is going to expand. So in the future, in the summer, I do have some plans of having some guests on the show. I had to wait until I knew I was, prepared to be able to have a guest on the show and see what to talk about and be an interviewer as well as a commentator. And there are a couple people in mind that I'm going to be having on the show. I've been talking with them and we're figuring out some dates. There's also going to be some things coming up as well for some specials. I've talked about that before. I did that for Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, my birthday month, and I was toying around with the idea of doing Pride Month because, it's June, but because I took my break and because I had to dive in to prepare this special, I'm like, oh shit, I missed my opportunity. But I will do a special at the end of the month where I will be having a select of LGBTQIA movies. And I will be having a whole episode about that. I don't know what it's going to be because you know how the Lotto system goes. I don't know when you don't know. But that is the general plan, to kind of work with that idea and kind of go hand in hand and just sort of meet halfway. So that idea is there. In August, I will be doing Anime August. Because I want to talk more about anime on the show since it was a big part of my life for 10 years. And I've been kind of surprised, like, hey, we haven't had an anime episode quite yet. It didn't get there until Yu Yu Hakusho came up for my birthday month. And I got to talk about a little bit about Alita Battle Angel. But it'll be given the time to another part of the genre that is very underrated. In a way, even though anime is now kind of part of our pop culture and is no longer, subculture, still, I'd like to be able to do that. And now that I'm in a position that I can provide these certain specials, I've always said that the Lotto system is kind of like the non-violent Hunger Games, that you just never know what's going to be drawn to be played or picked. And as much as I love keeping the spontaneity of it all, there's also some episodes that have existed far too long than they have to be, and they really need to get cleaned out just so I can be able to have it. But I also don't want to just breach my favoritism and just pick that episode. That's really not going to be fair to those that are waiting for a specific episode, or the other ones that still need to have a fair chance of the spontaneous Lotto pick. So with these specials, it kind of helps clean that out a little bit, that specific genre gets a little bit of a reduce. So it still has the spontaneity of it all, but it will cater to a specific genre that maybe someone out there has been waiting for a while. This show really goes into so many different paths of talking about genres and talking about certain specific historical elements to movies, and everything is brought into this show in a very healthy balance that I wish was more, that I wish my life was as balanced as this show that I've made. But so far, that is the only plans I have for the events for a certain month. If there is a specific month of genres that you would like to hear on the show for, I don't know, September or March or July, please let me know and I will be thinking on that. I'm always up for ideas. There's so many that go through my head, and I am not someone to, deprive someone else, an idea that they would love to see, because you never know until you try. For the final wrap-up on the special, I just want to say that this show is kind of like the Forrest Gump of my life. Just like in the movie when Forrest was present for meeting JFK, meeting Elvis Presley, that he was there for all of those magnificent moments of life. And this show has been there for me in the turning points of my life. I made this show after I broke up with the man that abused me. And then the show put me back on my feet again, helped me find my voice. And then months later, I had to sever ties with someone who was my friend for several years. And this show got me through that as well. I sort of discreetly mention at those certain moments throughout the duration of these episodes about how the show helped me out through a rough moment. And it really does have a therapeutic element for me that I can come in here and just talk about movies, talk about TV shows. My problems aren't going to go away. I still fix them, and I'm still in the process of healing. But this show still keeps me moving forward, keeps me pushing me, that I can collectively work on myself and have a outlet that I can get all of my emotions out. And seeing all these moments where I've gotten wildly expressive or emotional about stuff, it's really helped me out in so many ways to still work through my problems. And this is the best decision I ever made in my life. Having the show has been an honor, but it is also an honor of finally getting to be in the same position as the other content creators and sort of be in their shoes, and I get to do things that they do. I get to make specials, and I get to finally cover stuff that's this amazing topic and see what I can just bring to the table. Even though I'm not really going to be the be-all, end-all for movie commentators, I'm just a movie commentator. I love talking about this stuff and being able to provide a show where I'm not telling people how to watch a movie, but I do give them something and then they can do what they want to with that option to see how that will change the experience, and they can decide for themselves if this moment is going to change the way they watch movies, or if they just want something to be able to talk about and learn more about a certain movie or TV show that they never want to watch in their life, but they feel they have a grasp of understanding for it. And it's wonderful that I get to provide that on this show, that I get to speak what I want to, but I also feel like I'm not trying to change the way you think about things, because I don't like that. I don't like people that change the way they think unless they're mean. Then you gotta change the way you think. But it is nice, because I never liked being ridiculed for the way that I watched movies. And when I started making this show, it's wonderful that I still get to be able to make a safe space of environment, that it doesn't matter what you watch. It doesn't matter what you're into, as long as it's, in good taste and it's not disgusting. But it matters that you shouldn't be shunned or shamed for something that you watch. And over the year that I've done this show, it's nice to hear the feedback from my friends that have said that they feel safe and that they feel comforted by this show that has just a neutral amount of information in here. They don't feel like they've been persuaded or swayed. They just got to have company there in the form of me talking about movies and TV shows. And I didn't see that coming in a million years, knowing, wow, I guess my healing must be getting it pretty good if I'm able to extend this grapevine of gratitude and comfort to those that are just tuning in every Sunday for me to talk about a random TV show or random movie. It's a lot to think about, and that sounded like a lot of bizarre tangent stuff rolled into one, but I'm positive my listeners out there know what I'm talking about. But it has been an honor to be your host for 50 episodes, and here's to 50 more. So with that said, it's time to get back to our regular programs of talking about movies and TV shows. I gotta get this show back on the shows. Alrighty. So I have some new suggestions in here. So this is going to be a little interesting about what we're going to find. So let's find out together what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. Here we go. Let me just mix it up really good. Let me throw that back in there. And now that you know how the Lotto system works, it's going to be a little interesting for you guys to know how it works. Okay, I got one. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is going to be a treat. And it kind of feels like a summer movie in a way. Maybe, I don't know. We'll find that out for next Sunday. So the next episode on the Screen Queen is going to be back to school. We're going back to the 80s, baby. Oh, y'all know that's my favorite decade. Ah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here for the 50th episode special of the Screen Queen. This was a hell of an episode to bring so many personal stories and give the entire story on how the Screen Queen came to be. And I'm very proud to be your host, and thank you so much for being my audience. If you'd like to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. And if you'd like to see the funny things I put up on TikTok about movies and TV shows, you can find me at the Mystical Space Witch. And if you're interested in seeing the movie series and TV shows that I have made random references to in my book in Glorious Ink, you can find it in the description box. Alrighty, this is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!